Hello, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to all of you. Welcome to myfinanceteacher.org. Today, as a bit of a Christmas wrap-up, let's have a look at a market review looking at the dollar, gold, silver, crude oil, as well as oil producers. Starting with the US dollar, the daily short-term cycle on the US dollar has been going on for only 23 days. And while yes, cycles can be pretty short, as for example this daily cycle in July, usually they last for a couple of months. And if you stretch this one into a couple of months, you get right into that FOMC meeting at the end of November. Hence, what I generally expect is a bit of weakness from the US dollar, perhaps into that usual cycle duration of a couple of months, again perhaps into that FOMC meeting, where most of the market expects the rates to stay as they are, that's at 84%, but according to the market there is 16% chance of lower rates. And if Powell dispels this doubt, if any sort of rate cuts are postponed, that might provide some strength to the US dollar. With dollar falling, most assets will find it beneficial, especially gold and silver. Looking at gold, the intermediate cycle in gold is now 77 days long. Usually these cycles last for around a half a year, so we are perhaps getting close to that midpoint. We might be getting close to the top of the cycle, but there is still a pretty good chance of a continued strength again into that FOMC meeting, while the US dollar is likely going to decline. Perhaps one of the resistance zones here is testing that 2100, maybe a fake breakout above that before dropping down into the short-term daily cycle low, and perhaps later on into that intermediate cycle low. And maybe over the next few weeks, with this gradual rise towards that fake out above 2100, RSI might actually confirm with a bit of a lower high again, possibly showing us some signs of an upcoming turnaround in momentum down into the intermediate cycle low. But that's in the intermediate term. In the short term though, I think there is still a pretty good chance to gain from both gold as well as silver. Looking at silver, usually silver does well into later stages of the intermediate cycles in precious metals. So looking at a weekly chart, we see silver here and gold price in this orange line. Starting on the left here, that's the beginning of the intermediate cycle in March 2020 out of that pandemic low, and we see that in the first couple of months of that intermediate cycle, the gains in gold and silver were somewhat similar, while silver significantly outperformed gold into the later stage of that rally into the cycle top. The next intermediate cycle started over here around November 2020, and what we see is that silver bottomed 1 week late. In the first couple of months, the strength of the rally was relatively similar, but silver outperformed again into the later stage of this rallying phase. Looking at the next cycle low, again, silver started that cycle pretty late. It bottomed a couple of weeks after gold, and again, only outperformed later into that rallying phase. Switching to September-October 2021, again at the beginning of that rallying phase, silver was only catching up with gold and outperformed into the later stage of this rally. And same again from the lows in late 2021, silver is catching up with gold, outperforming near the top. Same again in the late 2022. Silver is doing relatively similarly with gold into September and October, and again outperforming into the later stage of that intermediate cycle rally. Same again in the previous intermediate cycle, where silver was doing relatively similarly in the first 3 weeks and outperformed into the latter 3 or 4 weeks within the rallying stage of that previous intermediate cycle. And what's been going on during the ongoing intermediate cycle? Well, silver has caught up with gold, and if pattern repeats, again, nobody does know the future, we might see silver finally outperform gold in the last 2 to 3 weeks of this rally into the intermediate cycle top. If that happens, we're likely going to see silver retest $26, and again, if outperformance over gold is significant, we hopefully might see silver test close to $27. That's the resistance from the intermediate cycle top back in March 2022. But to be honest, with my personal positions, I would perhaps reduce those positions before reaching 27, just to be slightly on a safer side. Moving on to energy, crude oil is so far performing relatively well. We've talked about an intermediate cycle low in mid-December. We've seen positive divergence from RSI, and crude oil came pretty close to testing that support zone around $67. That's based on that triple low last summer. So far, crude oil regained the 20-day moving average. That's the middle of the Bollinger Bands. RSI is about to regain the neutral level at 50. These are both so far positive signs. Over the next 1 or 2 weeks, we'll likely see the test of the 200 and the 50-day moving average before perhaps a bit of a cool down, followed by a continuation higher into this new intermediate cycle. And a bit of a confirmation that all bullish signs are on XLE, oil producers. We see that XLE has already regained the 200-day moving average. It's testing the breakout above that 50-day moving average, and it's testing that early December high. Producers leading crude oil higher is also a positive sign. And lastly, natural gas is so far positive as well. We've likely seen the end of that intermediate cycle in mid-December. I've mentioned about that in one of my recent videos. That previous cycle was extremely long. That's a new record since 2017 at least. So the next cycle is probably going to be relatively short. Plus, historically speaking, we do often see short cycles after a significant drop. So again, as I mentioned in my recent video on energy, it's probably not a bad idea to start taking your profits relatively early. Other than that though, so far everything is going according to plan, according to expectations. Remember, nobody does know the future, we just look at likely future scenarios based on historical performance and cycles. For much more details on a range of assets, join us at myfinancesteacher.org. Just scroll down and click this Join Now button. By the way, membership fee for new members is going to increase in January. Again, Merry Christmas everyone, Happy Holidays, enjoy your marvelous Merry Monday. Bye bye.